CityLight family, and welcome. I hope you enjoy today's online service.
Oldu the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. And hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to break, and out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Oh, we sang. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began I know thou art known. For thee all the folly of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior art thou. If ever I love only my Jesus is. And I love thee because thou hast first loved me and purchased my pardon on Calvary's tree. I love thee for wearing the thorns on thy brow. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now, right now. Oh, right now. I love you, Lord. I love you, Lord. Right now. Right now. Today is the day. Oh, you have longed it first. I love thee in life, and I will love thee in death, and praise thee as long as thou hast lended me breath, and say when the death dew lies cold on thy brow, if ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now.
We're going through, as most of you guys know, we've been going through Matthew chapter 10.
Ak si teda spomínate, tak prechádzame Matúšom 10. kapitolou.
And remember, Jesus is sending these 12 guys, these disciples, out to go and pretty much do what he does.
A Pán Ježiš vysielal svojich učeníkov, svojich 12 a robí to, čo väčšinou robieval.
Up to this point, they've been listening to Jesus, they've been watching what he does, and they've kind of just been there.
Doteraz tam s ním boli, počúvali ho a pozorovali, čo robí.
So it's been really theoretical.
Čiže doteraz to všetko bolo také teoretické.
And now he's saying, like, I want you to actually go out and live what I've been doing and do what I've been doing.
A teraz im hovorí, že proste chcem, aby ste išli, aby ste žili, aby ste robili to, čo aj ja som robil.
You know, we would call it today the Christian life.
A v dnešnej dobe by sme to nazývali kresťanský život.
Right? And we know that the message that Jesus keeps preaching, as we've been seeing, as we've been going through the story of Jesus, is that he keeps saying the kingdom of heaven is near.
A to posolstvo, ktoré vidíme vo všetkých evanjeliách a tým, čo sme si študovali, bolo to, že Pán Ježiš hovoril, že nebeské kráľovstvo sa priblížilo.
That God is coming and he wants to meet with people, right?
Že Pán Boh prichádza a chce sa stretávať s ľuďmi.
And when he comes, he brings his grace and his mercy and his love and his forgiveness.
A keď prichádza, tak dáva svoje milosrdenstvo, svoju milosť, svoju lásku a svoje odpustenie.
And that's good news, right?
A to je dobrá správa.
That's why they call it the gospel or the good news, right?
A preto to nazývajú aj evanjeliom.
And our assumption as believers is that, you know, okay, so God is coming and he's going to bring all these good things.
A našim takým predpokladom je, že keď prichádza Pán Boh, tak bude prinášať všetky tieto dobré veci.
And if I have accepted him, then these good things are going to come to me, right?
A ak ja som ho prijal, tak všetky tieto dobré veci sa budú odohrávať alebo sú pre mňa.
And the assumption is that life is going to get better or easier. Right?
A predpokladom je, že život bude jednoduchší a ľahší.
And if you've been a believer for a while, you know that sometimes that's not always true.
A ak ste veriaci už nejaký čas, tak viete, že toto nie je vždycky pravda.
I have a few young guys in my mind who've come up and they've asked, I want to be baptized.
A ja som mal nejakých chalanov, ktorí prišli ku mne, boli mladí a hovorili mi, že ja chcem byť pokrstený.
You know, they have some struggles in their life.
Mali nejaké problémy vo svojich životoch.
And they're tired of having these problems.
A boli unavení z tých všetkých problémov.
And they think, okay, if I follow Jesus, all my problems are going to be gone, right?
A mysleli si, že dobre, teraz keď budem nasledovať Pána Ježiša, tak akože všetky tieto problémy vymiznú.
And I try to say, slow down.
A ja som hovoril, že no počkaj.
It's good to be baptized.
Je dobre byť aj pokrstený.
It's good to be a Christian.
Je dobre byť kresťanom.
But it's not like a magic pill that's going to save all your problems.
Ale nie je to nejaká zázračná pilulka, ktorá ťa vyslobodí od všetkých tvojich problémov.
That one day you're going to have all these problems and the next day you're going to have no problems.
Že jedného dňa tu máš všetky tie tvoje problémy a zrazu všetky zmiznú.
It just doesn't work that way, right?
Tak to nefunguje.
Right, and if you've been a Christian for a while, you know it doesn't work that way, right?
A ak ste kresťania už nejaký čas, tak viete, že to tak nefunguje.
And even last week we spoke about how Jesus said very clearly, he says, in this world you're going to have problems, you're going to have troubles, you're going to have pain.
A minulý týždeň sme hovorili o tom, že Pán Ježiš to aj zasľúbil, že v tomto svete budete mať problémy a budete mať starosti a ťažkosti.
You know, so this assumption that everything is going to be sunshine is not true, okay?
A tento predpoklad, že bude svietiť len slnko a všetko bude úžasné, nie je pravdivé.
In fact, the reality is, as you follow Jesus, as you kind of move in the ways of God, that you're actually going to have some problems.
Ale realitou je, že ak nasledujete Boha, nasledujete Pána Ježiša, tak budete mať problémy.
It's actually a road that kind of does set you up for some conflicts.
A budete mať aj nejaké konflikty, ako keby sa dávate na takú cestu, kde budete mať viacej tých konfliktov.
And Jesus is really like, I mean, he's cool in the way that he lets these guys know this is what's going to happen when you follow me.
A Pán Ježiš to bolo také super, že aj povedal týmto svojim učeníkom dopredu, že toto sa udeje, keď pôjdete za mnou.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
A neobaluje to do cukru.
He's honest.
Ale hovorí to pravdivo.
And so I want to pick up where we left off last week in Matthew chapter 10 verse 34.
A chcel by som teda nadviazať tam, kde sme skončili minulý týždeň, Matúšovi 10:34.
And I'm going to read verse 34 through 38.
Od 34. po 38. budem čítať.
We'll just do it in this section in English, okay?
Ale v angličtine to budeme čítať.
Okay, it says, do not suppose, so this is Jesus speaking.
Tu hovorí teraz Pán Ježiš.
It says, do not suppose that I've come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the member of his own household or family. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Verse 38, whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me, and whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life in me, loses their life for me, for my sake, will find it. So Jesus speaks about this kind of conflict. And I know if you read these scriptures, it's a little bit like, what's he talking about?
A Pán Ježiš tu hovorí o nejakom konflikte a my keď si to čítame, tak sa môžeme tak zamýšľať, že o čom to tu vlastne hovorí?
You know, I thought Jesus is like this peace-loving guy. Right?
Ja som si myslela, že však Ježiš má byť taký milujúci, pokojný človek.
And now he's saying he's not necessarily always bringing peace.
A tu je napísané, že nebude vždycky prinášať pokoj,
But he's known as the Prince of Peace.
ale je známy aj tým, že je knieža pokoja.
So how does this work out? You know,
Tak ako toto funguje?
how can he be the Prince of Peace yet not bring peace at the same time?
Ako
Right?
môže byť kniežaťom pokoja a zároveň neprináša pokoj?
So he's bringing there. When you follow Jesus, there's this setup for conflict, right?
Čiže keď nasledujeme Pána Ježiša, tak máme tak ako keby predurčenie toho, že nebudeme mať pokoj.
He says, "I've come to turn."
A je tam napísané, že prichádzam, aby som niečo zmenil.
Yeah. Remember, he's come to turn. He's come to change something.
Prichádza s nejakou zmenou,
He's come to make a new direction for us, right?
dáva nám nové nasmerovanie.
And that's what he speaks about many times. Jesus preached many times, says, I've come to give you a new life.
A o tomto Pán Ježiš kázal častokrát a hovorí nám, že prišiel som, aby som vám dal nový život.
I've come to make you a new creation, a new kind of thing.
Prišiel som z vás spraviť nové stvorenstvo.
He says, I've got this life and I want to invite you into it, people.
Ja mám tento život a pozývam vás, ľudia, doňho.
And just like the picture back here, so we've got this, this group of fish, and then we've got this one that's kind of going the other direction.
A máme tu tieto rybičky na tom obrázku a je jedna, ktorá ide ako keby tým opačným smerom,
He's doing its own thing, right?
ktorá si robí ako keby to svoje.
And that's, if you're a believer, that's you. You're doing your own thing, right?
A to si ty ako kresťan, tiež si robíš to niečo iné,
You're doing
svoje,
something different.
niečo odlišné.
But you notice that there's all these other fish, right? They're going the opposite direction.
A ako vidíte tie iné rybičky, ktoré idú tým protichodným smerom,
And that's where the conflict comes in.
a tu nastáva ten konflikt.
Because you got this flow or this prúd or this current.
A máte takýto prúd, ktorý ide,
And that is kind of like our culture, right?
a to je naša kultúra.
Our culture moves in a direction.
Naša kultúra sa hýbe ako keby určitým smerom.
Our communities move in a direction.
Naše spoločenstvo sa hýbe týmto smerom.
Our families move in directions,
Naše
right?
rodiny chcú ísť tiež nejakým smerom.
Right? There is this kind of direction that life is just kind of taking us.
To je ako keby ten smer toho nášho života, ktorý nás chce ťahať so sebou.
And that's kind of like the flow, right?
A to je ten prúd.
And, every culture has its own little flow, right?
A každá kultúra má ako keby ten svoj vlastný prúd.
We like to talk about, you probably heard about the American dream, right?
A možno si počuli niektorí o tom americkom sne.
But we don't live in America, we live here in Slovakia, right?
A nežijeme v Amerike, žijeme tu na Slovensku.
So let's talk about the Slovak dream.
Tak sa porozprávame o
Now, I'm
slovenskom
not
sne.
Slovak, but I lived here long enough to, I think I figured it out.
Nie som síce Slovák, ale dosť dlho som tu žil, tak asi viem, o čo.
So in my opinion, the Slovak dream is this.
O čom je tu ten slovenský sen a myslím si, že je to toto.
The thing that we aspire to.
A niečo, za čím po čom túžime.
The flow of life.
Ten náš prúd života.
Basically it goes like this.
A asi to takto funguje.
I go to school.
Idem do školy.
When I'm done with school, I get a good job.
Keď skončím škole, tak dostanem dobrú prácu.
If I can I try to be a manager.
A ak sa budem snažiť dostatočne, tak budem manažerom.
Or I try to be an entrepreneur. I try to be my own boss.
Alebo budem akože priekopníkom a budem vlastným šéfom.
Then I try to find a good partner.
Potom si nájdem dobrého partnerku.
Have 2 kids, boy and a girl.
Budem mať 2 deti, chalana a babu.
Have a nice car.
Budem mať pekné auto.
Have a nice house.
Budem mať pekný dom.
Make a little money.
Nejaké peniaze budem zarábať.
And then eventually I'll die.
A potom zomrem.
Right? And that's kind of the goal.
No retirement?
Oh, well, there's retirement in there. There's a little beach in there and some trips, right?
No, aj nejaký dôchodok, aj nejaké pobrežie.
It's like the song, The Bittersweet Symphony, right? Just, find someone, make some money and die. Right?
To je ako, že nájdeš niekoho, zarobíš niečo a potom zomreš.
And that is kind of what most people around us, here in our country aspire to. That's kind of it, right?
A toto je niečo, po čom túžia ľudia okolo nás v tejto krajine.
And none of those things are bad.
Nič z toho nie je
You know,
zlé.
I mean, they're good goals. They're good dreams.
Sú to dobré sny, sú to dobré ciele.
But you know what? I think Jesus is calling us to something a little bit more than that, okay?
Ale ja si myslím, že Pán Ježiš nás volá do niečoho, čo je ešte viacej než len toto.
And but that dream that I described, that is the kind of the current in our society.
Ale toto, čo som vám opísal, tento sen, tak to je ten taký prúd v našej spoločnosti.
But there's a reality. I'm going to give a quote for you.
Ale realitou je tento citát, ktorý vám prečítam.
Love this one. Even a dead fish can go with the flow.
Aj mŕtva ryba dokáže ísť po prúde.
Okay? Even a dead fish can go with the flow.
Aj mŕtva ryba dokáže ísť s prúdom.
Right. I know people personally who are living the Slovak dream.
Ja poznám ľudí, ktorí žijú tento slovenský sen,
But they're dead inside.
ale sú ako keby mŕtvi vnútri v sebe.
Right? They have everything that everyone wants, but they're still not happy.
Majú všetko to, po čom ostatní túžia, ale stále nie sú vo vnútri šťastní.
Because as good as those things are, they don't always make you happy.
A aj keď tieto všetky veci sú dobré, tak oni sami zo seba ťa neobšťastnia.
And Jesus is calling his people to be someone who goes against that flow.
A Pán Ježiš povoláva týchto svojich ľudí, svojich učeníkov, aby išli proti tomu prúdu.
He's calling you to what I'm going to call the salmon life. Okay?
Povoláva nás do života lososa.
I know Annie Vetka loves salmon, so I just chose salmon for her.
No, I'll be hungry for
She's going to be thinking about lunch now.
It's not salmon.
It's not salmon. Oh, okay. So, you know, what's that?
1.5 kg.
1.5 kg? Okay. All right.
We would have to pray for this one too, feed all of us, right?
Right? Now, the salmon, he goes against the flow, right?
Ale losos pláva proti prúdu.
That's what they're famous for, right? They go actually up the river, not down the river, but up the river.
Týmto sú veľmi známi, že plávajú proti prúdu a idú, neplávajú s riekou, ale proti rieke.
Because at the end, they're gonna have a bunch of babies and they're gonna produce life there, okay?
Lebo tam úplne na tom konci budú mať tie malé rybičky a potom sa tam rozmnožia.
And in a way, that's maybe a nice picture for what Jesus has called his people to.
A toto je taký úžasný príklad toho, do čoho nás aj Pán Ježiš povoláva.
As we kind of cut through that current of culture,
Keď aj my ideme proti tomu prúdu kultúry,
you know, we're supposed to bring life.
tak my máme prinášať život.
But
Ale
it's not always easy,
nie vždy to je ľahké.
all right? There's dangers.
Občas je tam nejaké nebezpečenstvo.
You know, it's not safe to go against the flow.
Nie je to bezpečné, že idete proti prúdu.
It's dangerous, okay?
Je to nebezpečné.
You're never going to forget these images, right?
Nikdy nezabudnete na tieto obrázky.
Good. I did a
It's just
lesson.
a teddy.
It's a little teddy bear, right? I did a lesson this week with some students.
Tento týždeň som učil nejakých študentov angličtinu
We're talking about the topic of being bored.
a rozprávali sme sa, témou bolo, že sme bored.
Boring, nudne.
Unudení. Hej, unudení.
And we asked, what are some situations that you can get bored in?
A ja som sa ich spýtala, že aké sú teda tie situácie, v ktorých ste unudení.
Some people put going to church.
A niektorí z nich odpovedali, že to, že chodíme do kostola.
We can all amen that sometimes, right?
A my dokážeme na to povedať amen.
So hopefully today will not be one of those boring days, okay?
Dúfam, že dneska nebude nudný kostol.
All right, you will remember there was a salmon and the bear, right?
Budete si pamätať aspoň toho lososa a toho macka.
Right. But I just do this so that we have this image that Jesus is calling us to kind of go in a different direction than everyone else is sometimes.
Pán Ježiš nás povoláva, aby sme išli tým iným smerom oproti prúdu, ako idú všetci ostatní.
But it's not always safe.
Ale nie vždy je to bezpečné.
There's going to be problems.
Budú tam problémy
Right. And so we're going to go through that text that we just read
a budeme si prechádzať týmto textom, čo sme si prečítali
and kind of identify three conflicts, three difficulties.
a budeme tam mať 3 konflikty, 3 ťažkosti.
And so the first one is, we can call it culture.
Prvý z nich je kultúra.
You know, all of us, wherever we're from, we grow up in a culture.
Každý z nás, odkiaľkoľvek pochádzame, sme vyrastali v nejakej kultúre.
Whether that be the culture of Slovakia or California or India.
Či Či už to bola kultúra Slovenska, alebo Kalifornie, alebo Indie.
And regardless of wherever you're from, there is a conflict between the culture that you grow up in and the culture of Jesus.
A kdekoľvek si vyrastal, tak je tam konflikt medzi tou kultúrou a kultúrou Pána Ježiša.
And sometimes the biggest battlefield in your heart is, in the sphere of the family.
A najväčšie boje sa niekedy odohrávajú v rámci tvojej rodiny.
Your community, right?
V tvojej spoločnosti.
And I don't know if anyone experienced this before.
Neviem, či ste to zakúsili niekedy.
Right, where you become a believer, you become a follower of Jesus, and then all of a sudden you have some conflict in your family.
A keď sa staneš veriacim, zrazu v tej rodine máš veľké problémy.
Where there's a little bit of opposition, or you begin to rub people wrong, or they begin to rub you wrong.
Kde ľudia idú proti tebe a ty ideš proti ním, proti tomu, čo oni veria.
Where you have a few awkward moments,
Kde
right?
máš také divné momenty.
Right, and it's because, your culture is so tied with your family.
A tvoja kultúra je veľmi prepojená na tú rodinu, v ktorej si vyrastal.
Your friends, your family, your neighborhood, your community, that's where you understand how life is.
Tvoja spoločnosť, tvoja rodina, tvoji priatelia, tvoja komunita, takýmto spôsobom si chápal život.
That's where we get our worldview.
Z tohto sme čerpali naše názory na život, na svet.
That's where we understand what's right and wrong.
A z tohto sme pochopili, čo je správne, čo nie je správne.
That's where we, kind of have our likes and our dislikes.
A na základe tohto sme mali veci, ktoré sa nám páčili a nepáčili.
Expectations.
Očakávania.
Right? And that's why you can have like two houses next door to each other.
A to je ako keby si mal dva domy, ktoré sú vedľa seba.
And one family can raise their kids one way and another family can raise their kids completely different way, right?
A jedna rodina môže svoje deti vychovávať jedným spôsobom a tá druhá ich môže vychovať úplne iným spôsobom.
Right? Because they've got a different little family cultures going on there.
Lebo majú ako keby iné rodinné kultúry.
Right? And then you get, you just think about married couple, right?
A potom, keď sa zamýšľaš nad manželskými pármi.
So I come from one family, Ivetka comes from another family.
A ja pochádzam z jednej rodiny, Ivetka pochádza z inej rodiny.
Put us together.
Keď nás dáte dokopy.
And now we have to figure out how do we raise kids.
A teraz my máme prísť na to, že ako my budeme vychovávať deti.
And I got my way and she's got her way.
A ja mám svoj spôsob a ona má svoje spôsoby.
Sometimes there's little sparks, right?
Niekedy to iskry.
Right? Right? And she usually wins because she's right. At least that's what I have to officially say.
A ona väčšinou vyhráva, lebo má pravdu, alebo aspoň oficiálne to musím tak povedať.
Single man, take notes.
Slobodní chalani, zapíšte si to.
Right? If mama's not happy, no one's happy.
Ak mamka nie je šťastná, tak nikto nie je šťastný.
Right? But you got to find your way as a family, right?
A ako rodina musíte proste nájsť ten váš spôsob.
Right? We learn how to be people, basically,
Učíme sa, ako byť ľudia.
in that beautiful little bubble called the family, right?
V tej takej krásnej bubline, ktorá sa volá rodina.
We learn how to love there,
Učíme sa, ako milovať.
right? And then we begin to, some of us, we begin to follow Jesus, right?
A potom nasledujeme Pána Ježiša.
And sometimes there's a clash between what we're so familiar and comfortable with what God is requiring of us, right?
A potom niekedy sú tam konflikty medzi tým, čo nám je tak dosť známe a tým, čo od nás Pán Boh očakáva.
And, if you come from a culture that is not predominantly Christian,
A ak pochádzaš z kultúry, ktorá nie je kresťanská,
you probably feel it more, right?
tak tam to cítiš viac.
Now, I know most of you guys from India are from Christian families,
A ja viem, že väčšina z vás z Indie ste z kresťanských rodín,
but your culture is not Christian, right?
ale vaša kultúra nie je kresťanská.
Right? And so there's conflict and there's clashes to be a Christian, right?
A sú tam konflikty a sú tam také strety, keď chcete byť kresťanom.
Because the way your families have raised you is not the way the rest of the culture is raising you,
Lebo ako vás vychovávala vaša rodina, tak to nie je ako funguje vlastne celá tá kultúra.
right? And our brothers who come from Muslim backgrounds, right?
Alebo naši bratia, ktorí pochádzajú z moslimského pozadia,
Who are now followers of Jesus, right?
ktorí nasledujú Pána Ježiša,
Where there's still this family pressure, right?
tak sú tam také rodinné nátlaky.
Or, holidays come up and, hey, come do the Muslim prayers with us.
Alebo prídu rôzne sviatky a tá rodina hovorí, že poď teraz s nami a budeme odriekať tie moslimské modlitby.
Right? And it takes, there's some conflict there when you say no.
A potom vzniká nejaký konflikt, keď im povieš, že nie, že nejdeš to už robiť.
Right? And even in our culture here in Slovakia,
A aj v našej kultúre tu na Slovensku.
we're kind of a Christian culture, right?
A sme tu proste sme nejaká kresťanská kultúra,
But there's a lot of non-Christian things even that we think of as Christian.
ale je veľa takých nekresťanských vecí, i keď sa možno pokladajú za kresťanské.
I think actually here in Slovakia you can pretty much do whatever you want to do
Tu na Slovensku asi môžeš robiť čokoľvek
and be called a good Christian.
a môžeš byť nazývaný dobrý
You
kresťan,
just kind of have to have moderation, right?
ale ako keby si to musel mať s nejakou mierou,
Like you can cheat a little bit,
môžeš trošku podvádzať,
you can drink a little bit too much,
trošku môžeš piť niekedy až veľa.
and whatever, you can do pretty much whatever you want as long as you just don't do too much of it, right? And too often, right?
Môžeš robiť ako keby čokoľvek, ak to nerobíš veľmi veľa toho zlého, tak si v pohode.
And as long as you go to the church, then everyone think, okay, it's cool,
A ak ideš do kostola, tak každý si myslí, že no, však on je v pohode.
right? And that's kind of the culture, right?
To je ako keby tá kultúra.
Right now, Jesus, he addresses this conflict with family.
Ale Pán Ježiš sa dotýka aj tohto konfliktu, ktorý sa odohráva v rodine.
Those are those words that I read earlier.
To sú tie slova, ktoré som čítal predtým.
And these are not his words. He's actually quoting the prophet Micah.
A toto nie sú jeho slova, ale sú to slova proroka Micháša.
And I'm going to read a different translation. It's kind of more of a summary. It's from the Message.
Prečítam vám trošku iný preklad týchto istých slov,
Kind of very modern language.
v takom modernom jazyku.
He says, don't think I've come to make your life cozy or comfortable.
Nemyslíte si, že som prišiel spraviť váš život takým pohodlným alebo útulným?
He says, I've come to cut like a sharp knife
Prišiel som, aby som rezal ako keby ostrým mečom
between a father and a son,
medzi otcom a synom,
between a daughter and a mother,
medzi matkou a dcérou,
a bride and her mother-in-law.
medzi nevestou a jej testinou. Čo to je? Svokra.
So, okay. And we know that relationship's always odd, right?
A tieto vzťahy so svokrovcami sú vždy také divné.
Right, okay. But anyways, he says, I come to cut through these comfortable, cozy relationships.
Ale Pán Ježiš hovorí, že som proste prišiel, aby som možno prerezával cez tieto také pohodlné vzťahy,
To free you for God.
aby som vás oslobodil pre Boha.
And even well-meaning family members might end up being your worst enemies.
A možno aj tí rodinní príslušníci, ktorí to s vami myslia dobre, budú vaši úhlavní nepriatelia.
Now, Jesus was quoting this prophet Micah who spoke these words hundreds of years before Jesus.
Pán Ježiš citoval tohto proroka Micháša, ktorý to hovoril stovky roky predtým.
And maybe for us, we hear them the first time.
A možno pre nás, my keď to počúvame prvýkrát,
But his original crowd, the people he was talking to, knew these words.
ale ten jeho pôvodný zástup, ku ktorému prehováral Pán Ježiš, tak oni poznali tieto slova.
This was a famous quote. They knew what he was talking about.
To bol známy citát a oni vedeli, o čom hovoril.
And they knew the context of this quote.
A takisto poznali aj to pozadie tohto citátu.
And the context was that Micah, this prophet, was basically rebuking the nation of Israel, the culture.
A prorok Micháš napomínal izraelský národ kvôli ich kultúre,
Because they had walked away from God.
lebo oni odišli od Boha
But they were saying, like, everything's fine.
a hovorili, že áno, všetko je v poriadku, všetko je dobré.
And what's interesting is what Jesus doesn't say.
A čo je zaujímavé, je to, čo Pán Ježiš tam necituje.
The verse before and after this quote.
A ten verš predtým a verš potom.
Because the verse before this quote, he says, don't trust people.
Lebo ten verš predtým hovorí, že neverte ľuďom.
It says, don't put your hope in human relationships.
Neskladajte svoju dôveru v ľudské vzťahy.
And then verse 6 is what we have up on the board.
6. verš máme na tabuli.
Is that because there is conflict in these relationships.
Lebo nastávajú konflikty v týchto vzťahoch.
And this conflict comes because everyone is just doing whatever they want to do.
A tieto konflikty nastávajú z toho, že každý si robí to, čo chce.
They're not following the creator of heaven and earth.
A nenasledujú tvorca neba a zeme.
And there's going to be conflict in those relationships.
A kvôli tomu to potom budú konflikty vo vzťahoch.
So don't put too much trust there.
Tak neskladajte svoju dôveru v tieto vzťahy.
And then the next verse, verse 7,
A 7. verš
says, watch out.
hovorí, že dávajte si pozor.
Or he says, I watch in hope for the Lord.
Alebo ja dávam pozor a hľadím v nádeji na Hospodina.
It says basically the bottom line is don't put too much trust in people.
A v preklade, keby sme si to povedali, je to, že neverte až tak veľmi ľuďom,
But put your trust, your hope in God.
ale verte Bohu, alebo svoju nádej skladajte v Boha.
So this is that first conflict. There's going to be conflict with people.
Čiže toto je ten prvý konflikt, ktorý budeme mať konflikt s ľuďmi.
People that you love.
S ľuďmi, ktorých máš aj rád.
People who are good.
Ľudia, ktorí sú dobrí.
He didn't say they're bad people.
Nie je tam napísané, že sú zlí
But he says
ľudia,
there's going to be conflict.
ale tam napísané, že budú tam konflikty.
Right? Because your hope is in one thing and their hope is in something else.
Lebo tvoja nádej je v niečo iné a ich nádej je v niečo odlišné.
So that's the first conflict. The second conflict is this.
Čiže to bol prvý konflikt. Druhý konflikt je
Is where do you put your confidence?
to, v čo skladáš svoju nádej.
Where do you put your hope?
Sorry.
Okay, great. So verse 37, I'm going to read it again. It says, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me.
Kto miluje otca alebo matku väčšmi ako mňa, nie je ma hoden. A kto miluje syna alebo dcéru väčšmi ako mňa, nie je ma hoden.
Now that's pretty strong words, right?
To sú dosť silné slova.
Because I hope that we all love our parents, right?
Ja dúfam a veľmi dúfam, že máme radi svojich rodičov.
I know we have, they're not perfect. They have
Viem,
problems.
že nie sú dokonalí, viem, že máme problémy.
And don't worry, when you become a parent, you'll realize you're not a perfect parent either.
A keď sa staneš ty rodičom, tak si uvedomíš, že tiež nie si dokonalý.
And your kids will remind you.
A deti ti to budú častokrát pripomínať.
Right? We're imperfect people.
Sme nedokonalí ľudia.
But hopefully there's a good amount of love there.
Ale budem dúfať teda, že je dosť veľa lásky z obidvoch strán.
So God is not telling you don't love those people.
Ale Pán Boh nám to nehovorí, že ich nemáme
He
milovať,
says, I want you to love me more.
ale hovorí nám, že chce, aby sme jeho milovali viac.
You know, our love for God should eclipse our love for family.
Naša láska voči Bohu má byť o mnoho vyššia ako naša láska pre našu rodinu.
And as thankful as we can be for having good families,
A môžeme byť veľmi vďační za to, že máme dobré rodiny,
you know, God, He wants His culture to be the culture that guides us.
ale Pán Boh chce, aby tá jeho kultúra bola tou kultúrou, ktorá nás vedie.
His ideas, His perspective,
Jeho myšlienky, jeho náhľady,
His love,
jeho láska.
you know. And that would form what we call our lives.
A toto má formovať to, čo nazývame našim životom.
Now I'm going to quote something from Jesus. He says it in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21.
Budem citovať ďalšie verše od Pána Ježiša, ktoré hovorí v Matúšovi
6:21.
6:21.
He says this. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart's going to be also.
Tam hovorí, že kdekoľvek je tvoj poklad, tam bude aj tvoje srdce.
Really simple math, right?
Veľmi jednoduchá matika.
You know, what you value the most,
Čokoľvek pokladáš za najhodnotnejšie,
that's where your heart's going to be,
tak tam bude aj tvoje srdce.
right? That's where your emotions and your heart is going to follow that, right?
A tam budú tvoje emócie, tvoje srdce, tvoje myšlienky.
So the really simple question we need to ask ourselves is, you know, where's our heart? Where's our treasure?
Takže naša otázka je, že kde je naše srdce, kde je náš poklad, čo je našim pokladom.
Because what you love will shape you,
Lebo to, čo ty miluješ, tak to ťa bude formovať.
right? It will shape your heart, it will shape your mind, it will shape your spirit.
To bude formovať tvoje srdce, tvoje myšlienky, tvojho ducha.
And for a long time, you know, when we're kids, our family is the one who's really shaping our hearts, our minds, our thoughts.
Keď sme boli malými deťmi, tak to bola naša rodina, ktorá formovala všetky naše myšlienky, celé to naše srdce.
Now I got this picture of this family,
Mám tu obrázok rodiny,
right? This little girl here,
je tam malé dievčatko
and these parents looking at her and they love her, right?
a rodičia, ktorí sa na ňu pozerajú, ju
Right.
milujú.
She is their little treasure.
Ona je ich pokladom.
And if you get a little daughter, she's going to be your little treasure,
A
right?
keď budeš mať dcerku, tak ju tiež budeš pokladať za poklad.
Right? And you've seen this with families, especially if they have a small child, first one,
A hlavne, ak je to ich prvé dieťa,
right? It's like, wow, right? This is it.
tak si vravia, že wow, že toto je ono.
Right? And you know, life before, everyone kind of did their own things, right?
A predtým v živote si robili svoje vlastné veci.
Right? All of a sudden the baby comes.
A zrazu prichádza babetko.
Now all the life is about the baby.
Teraz celý ten život je zameraný na to babetko.
Right? Before you could travel light, now you have to have the stroller and everything and all.
Predtým ste mohli cestovať a mohli ste cestovať akože celkom tak akože naľahko, ale teraz musíte mať aj kočík, aj plienky, aj všetko ostatné.
You know, the whole schedule of life gets rearranged right around this little person.
Celý ten váš denný režim sa preorientuje ohľadom tohto malého človečika.
And that's fine. That's how it's supposed to be, right?
A to je v poriadku, aj tak tam má byť.
Right. But it's this life built around this thing that they love. This
Je
little
to
person they
život,
love.
ktorý je zbudovaný okolo tohto človečika.
And likewise, that's kind of what God wants.
Ale toto je to, čo aj Pán Boh chce.
That we would love him more.
Že my by sme ho milovali viacej.
That we would be like that little baby.
Že my by sme boli ako to bábätko.
Or that he would be like that little
Teda,
baby
že
for
on
us.
by bol ako to bábätko pre nás.
That we would build our life around him.
Aby my sme zbudovali ten náš život okolo neho.
The focus would be right there.
Aby to zameranie naše bolo na ňo.
That he would be our treasure.
On by mal byť tým našim pokladom.
So the question we have to ask ourselves, and this is kind of where it becomes a conflict.
A otázku, ktorú sa máme pýtať, ktorá sa niekedy stáva aj tým konfliktom.
What do I love more?
Čo milujem viac?
Is it money that I love?
Sú to peniaze?
Is that what shapes me?
Je to to, čo milujem a to, čo ma formuje?
Is it my career?
Je to moja kariéra?
Is it my marriage?
Je to moje manželstvo?
Is it my kids or my family?
Sú to moje deti, moja rodina?
Is it my pursuit to get the big house or the nice car?
Je to moje nasledovanie toho môjho sna, že chcem mať veľký dom a veľké auto?
Because for many people, that's what shapes.
Lebo mnohých ľudí toto formuje.
And, all those things are good things, but they're not the best thing.
Všetky tieto veci sú dobré veci, ale nie sú to najlepšie veci.
I wish I wish the Slovak dream on everyone, okay?
A prajem každému, aby dostal tento slovenský sen.
But I hope that you dream bigger than that.
Ale budem dúfať, že budeme snívať o mnoho viac.
That's the point, to dream big, okay? Dream bigger than that.
To je tým cieľom, aby sme mali veľké sny.
So, we got this conflict with culture, we got this conflict of where do we put our confidence, where do we put our hope in?
Čiže máme konflikt kultúrny, máme konflikt nádeje, alebo to, v čo skladáme nádej.
And then a conflict with the cross, really.
A potom tretí konflikt je konflikt kríža.
I never ever had one of those days where you're just frustrated.
A neviem, či aj vy mávate také dni, že ste úplne frustrovaní.
Life is not going how you want it to do.
Život nejde tak, ako chcete.
You're like, my life, right?
A ste taký naštvatý, že toto je môj život.
I'm going to have a little confession.
Ja budem mať vyznanie
I
teraz.
might as well do it. I have my family members here.
Môžem to spraviť pred mojimi rodinnými
They
príslušníkmi.
know what I'm going to be talking about.
Vedia, o čom budem hovoriť.
So I was up in Dolny Kuban.
Bol som v Dolnom Kubíne.
Friday I had no work I had to do. No work.
Piatok som nemal naplánovanú žiadnu prácu.
It was a beautiful day.
Krásny, slnečný deň.
It's warm.
Teplo.
I got my mountain bike.
Mal som tam aj bicykel.
And I want to take a long ride up to Kubinska Hola.
A chcel som ísť na dlhú jazdu po Kubinskej holi.
But grandfather
Ale starky
has this little chata
má malú záhradku
that needs painting.
a strecha potrebuje byť namalovaná.
And it didn't get done the day before.
A deň predtým sa to nepodarilo spraviť.
And it needs to be done.
A treba to dorobiť.
And have this pressure to go do it.
A mám taký nátlak, že dobre, treba to aj spraviť.
And inside of me, I'm like, I go do it, okay?
A teda vo vnútri som si povedal, dobre, poviem to spraviť.
But inside, I'm just cursing, right?
Ale v mojom srdci akože preklínam všetkých.
As I'm on the roof painting,
A ako sedím na tej streche a malujem,
I'm just thinking, I could be on that mountain over there.
vidím tam kopec a že na tom kopci som teraz mohol byť.
As the sun is beating down on me, I'm thinking, I could be over there, right?
Ako na mňa svieti slniečko, tak si myslím, že tam som mohol teraz byť.
This is not how I want to live my life.
Toto nie je, ako chcem žiť môj život.
You know what I'm talking about, yeah? All right, and there's nothing wrong with painting the chata.
A nie je nič zlé na tom, že treba tú chatku namalovať.
It's a good thing. Grandfather needs the help, right?
A je to dobrá vec, a starky potrebuje pomoc.
But there's this struggle,
Ale je tam taký zápas,
right? Because we have this thing we call my life, right?
lebo máme tú vec, ktorú nazývame môj život.
And we're very jealous with it, right?
A sme veľmi žiarliví.
Right, and we don't like to share it, right?
A neradi sa zdieľame.
Right, and it gets in conflict when someone wants something from us, right?
A nastávajú konflikty, keď niekto iný od nás niečo chce.
So Yeah, God was working on me and up on the roof.
A Pán Boh na mne pracoval tam na tej streche.
And
And was using Gabriel as the angel.
yeah, he was my angel there. But Jesus says, he wants to bring us into a life it's more than our life.
Ale Pán Ježiš nám hovorí, že on nám chce dať o mnoho viacej do toho nášho života, ako len ten náš život.
More than our little things like wanting to go mountain biking.
Viacej než len to, že chceme ísť niekde na bicykel.
And those things that we hold on to so tightly.
A chce nám dať o mnoho viacej len než tie drobnosti, ktorých sa tak silno pridržame.
The things that frustrate us, right?
Tie veci, ktoré nás tak vytáčajú.
And it's almost like it says, do you want to hold on to your life?
A ako keby sa nás pýtal, chceš sa pridržať toho svojho života?
Or do you want to embrace my life?
Alebo chceš prijať ten môj život?
Do you want to embrace something bigger than the big house and the money and the car?
Chceš prijať niečo, čo je o mnoho väčšie ako veľký dom, veľké auto alebo rodina?
And like that picture that I showed earlier with the bear.
A ako ten obrázok, ktorý som vám ukázal s tým mackom?
Sometimes it's not easy.
Niekedy to nie je jednoduché.
Right, and Jesus says in verse 38, I'm going to repeat those words we read earlier.
A Pán Ježiš nám hovorí v 38. verši.
It says, whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for me, for my sake, will find it.
38-39. Ak to neberie svoj kríž a nenasleduje ma, nie je ma hoden. Kto nájde svoj život, stratí ho. A kto stratí život pre mňa, nájde ho.
Now, when he was saying this to the disciples, they totally understood what he was talking about.
Keď toto hovoril svojim učeníkom, tak oni úplne rozumeli, o čom hovorí.
The cross was not a nice little piece of jewelry that people hung around their necks.
Lebo kríž nebolo nejaký pekný príväzok alebo niečo, čo ľudia si zavesia na seba.
It was a form of punishment.
Bola to forma trestu.
It's the way you kill somebody.
A spôsob, ako niekoho zabíjate.
It meant death, okay?
To znamenalo smrť.
Right, and there was no sugarcoating this.
Nebolo to do nejakého cukru obalené.
He says, take up your cross, take up this thing that's going to kill you.
Alebo do nejakého pozlátka, ale on hovorí, že zoberte tento svoj kríž, niečo, čo vás zabije.
And crucify it, kill it.
A zabij to, ukrižuj to.
He's not telling you to commit suicide. It's nothing stupid like that, okay?
Nehovorí, že teraz akože máte sa ísť vyslovene, že zabiť.
But what he's saying is, just put to death some of those desires.
Ale hovorí, že tie niektoré túžby, ktoré máte, tak ukrižujte.
And it's not saying that all those things are bad.
A nie, že by boli vyslovene zlé tie túžby.
But sometimes you have to give up something to gain something better.
Ale niekedy sa proste musíme niečoho vzdať, aby sme niečo lepšie získali.
I think we're all trying to find our lives, right?
A ja si myslím, že každý z nás sa snaží nájsť si ten svoj život.
Right, if we weren't trying to look, we'd just be sitting on the couch watching television all day, right?
A keby sme nechceli, tak by sme sedeli na gauči a pozerali telku celý deň.
But we know that there's something more than that, right?
Ale vieme, že tam je niečo o mnoho viacej ako len toto.
And what he's saying here says, if you want to find your life, you want to find this amazing, exceptional life.
A čo nám to hovorí, je, že ak chcete nájsť tento úžasný život,
you got to lose it.
Tak musíte stratiť.
And you lose it by being lost in his.
A stratíte to tak, že budete stratení v ňom.
By following him.
Keď jeho budete nasledovať.
And he's leading you to something that's very different than the Slovak dream.
A on ťa vedie do niečoho, čo je úplne odlišné od toho slovenského sna.
And he's going to take you on grand adventures.
A zoberie ťa na úžasné dobrodružstvá.
He's going to raise you up into his life.
On ťa vyvýši do toho svojho života.
I could have lived the California dream.
Ja som mohol žiť ten kalifornský sen.
I could have stayed home.
Mohol som zostať doma.
It would have been nice to live by the beach.
Bolo by pekné, keby som býval pri pláži.
I could have found someone there and made some money and died eventually.
A mohol som tam niekoho nájsť a zarobiť si peniažky a tam zomrieť.
But God got a hold of me.
Ale Pán Boh sa ma uchopil.
And he said, go check out Slovakia.
A povedal mi, choď sa pozrieť na Slovensko.
And then when I came, he made me find her, or she found me, or I don't know.
A keď som prišiel na Slovensko, tak som našiel ju, alebo ona mňa, neviem presne, ako to bolo.
And he's taken us on this amazing adventure.
A zobral nás na také úžasné dobrodružstvo.
And he's blessed us in so many ways.
A požehnal nás takými úžasnými spôsobmi.
I mean, I didn't even, he's done so many things in and to and through us that I could never anticipate.
A spravil v nás, skrze nás a pre nás také úžasné zázraky, ktoré som nikdy ani neočakával.
And just as a bonus, he's kind of thrown in the Slovak life as well, the dream as well.
A ako bonus nám dal aj ten slovenský sen.
Plus the dogs, okay?
Plus ešte aj psi. We have 2 kids, but we don't have a daughter.
We don't have a daughter yet. we're hoping for grandkids one day.
Vnúčenca budú.
No, but what I'm trying to say
Ale čo tým chcem povedať?
is I don't regret that.
Neľutujem to.
As we have moved together trying to follow Jesus as best as we can.
Ako sme sa hýbali v tom a nasledovali Pána Ježiša, ako sme najlepšie vedeli.
He's doing things for us and in us that are bigger than what we could dream.
On robí v nás veci a skrze nás to, čo my sme možno ani si neodvážili vysnívať.
And it's good.
A je to dobré.
I know I've been long. Can I be just a little bit more? We'll move on. But I want to just go to one last thing about how do we embrace Jesus' life.
A ja by som sa chcel teda pozrieť na to, že ako budeme prijímať život Pána Ježiša.
Now, the Apostle Paul writes this. He was a guy who he knew what it was to rely on Jesus.
Apoštol Pavel vedel, aké to je spoliehať sa na Pána Ježiša.
And he writes to the church in Rome, and he says this in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 through 2.
A píše zboru, ktorý bol v Ríme, Rímanom 12, 1 a 2.
Mm-hmm. And he basically talks about how do you embrace the cross? How do you embrace this life that Jesus is offering?
A hovorí im, že ako majú príjmať tento život, ktorý Pán Ježiš ponúka.
He says, I urge you, or I encourage you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy.
Prosím vás teda, bratia, pre milosrdenstvo Božie.
It says, look to God and see how merciful, look how awesome He is.
A ako keby im hovoril, že pozrite sa na to milosrdenstvo Božie a na to, aký je úžasný.
It says, in response, offer your bodies as living sacrifices.
A ako vaša reakcia na to, vydávajte svoje tela v živú obeť.
Which are holy and pleasing to God.
Svetú, Bohu príjemnú.
This is your true or proper worship.
Toto je vaša rozumná služba Bohu.
So basically it says, look at how amazing God is.
Pozrite sa na to, aký úžasný je Boh.
Respond through worship.
A reagujte na to uctievaním.
And the way you worship is you say you give yourself to Him.
A to, že uctievate, je, že sa mu odovzdávate.
Now, a sacrifice is something that's usually killed, right?
A obeť väčšinou je to, že niečo zabijete.
Right? He says, I want you to be a living sacrifice.
Ale on nám to hovorí, že chce, aby sme boli živou obeťou.
I want you to give your life.
Ja chcem, aby ste odovzdávali svoj život.
And say just, do whatever you want with it, God.
A hovorili Bohu, že Bože, ty s týmto životom rob, čo chceš.
And then it goes on, verse 2 says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world.
A nepripodobňujte sa tomuto svetu.
This world is pushing us into a pattern, right?
Tento svet sa nás snaží vtesnať do nejakej formičky.
Our culture pushes us into little molds, right?
Táto kultúra nás vtesnáva do nejakej formičky.
Right? You live in the house, you drive the Skoda, you have the 2 kids.
Žiješ v dome, máš Škodovku, máš 2 deti.
Right? It says, don't be pushed into that anymore.
Nenechajte sa vtesnať do takéhoto niečoho.
It says, be transformed, be changed by the renewing of your mind.
Ale premente sa obnovením mysle.
Let Jesus shape what your expectations are.
Dovolte, nech Pán Ježiš formuje tie vaše
Your
očakávania,
culture,
vašu
your
kultúru,
worldview.
váš svetonázor.
It says, and then you're going to be able to test and improve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will.
Aby ste vedeli rozpoznať, čo je vôľa Božia, totiž čo je dobré, milé a dokonalé.
God has a plan for you.
Pán Boh má pre teba plán.
And it's not to make your life difficult.
Nie je to, že chce sťažiť tvoj život.
Some people think God wants to take all your fun away.
Niektorí ľudia si myslia, že Pán Boh ti chce zobrať všetku zábavu.
He wants to make your life difficult or hard.
A že chce z tvojho života spraviť taký ťažký a obťažný.
It's not true.
Nie je to pravda.
Right? He actually has good, perfect, and pleasing for you.
Ale on má pre teba dobré, milé a dokonalé.
And it's a question, do we want it or not?
Otázkou je, že či toto chceme.
So I'm just going to end with this.
Skončím s týmto.
I want to encourage you to have that salmon life, okay?
Chcem, aby ste mali ten lososový život
Go against the flow.
a aby ste išli proti prúdu.
It doesn't mean that you have to have arguments with your family, okay? That's not the point.
A nemusíte sa vždy hádať s rodinou, to nie je tým cieľom.
Be a person of peace.
Ale buďte osobou pokoja.
But if there's conflict, you'll know that there's sometimes conflict because you have different hope.
Ale niekedy tie konflikty, ktoré budete mať, je preto, že máte inú nádej.
Because you're moving in a different direction.
Lebo idete iným smerom.
But the direction God is leading you has great blessings.
A ten smer, ktorým ťa Pán Boh berie, na ktorý ťa posúva, tam je nádej.
Now, the same Apostle Paul, he writes this. I'm going to read this last thing for you from Philippians 3.
A poslednú vec vám prečítam z Filipským 3.
Paul says, now remember, Paul's this great leader.
Pavol bol úžasným vodcom.
He says, I don't consider myself to have attained these things that I'm talking about.
A hovoril im, že nepokladám sa, že by som už dosiahol všetky tieto veci, o ktorých som vám písal.
He says, I'm not all fully there yet.
Nie som ešte na tej cieľovej rovinke.
He says, but one thing I do,
Ale jednu vec robím.
forgetting what's behind me,
Zabúdam na to, čo je za mnou.
I strain, I reach, I struggle for what is in front of me.
A zápasím a načahujem sa za tým, čo je predo mnou.
And I'm going to press forward. I'm going to push hard
A budem sa za tým snažiť,
to the goal to win the prize for which God has for me,
aby som vyhral tú cenu, ktorú Pán Boh má pre mňa pripravenú.
which is found in Christ Jesus.
A táto cena sa nachádza v Kristovi Ježišovi.
We all have cultures behind us.
My každý máme nejakú kultúru, ktorá je za nami.
We've all got baggage behind us.
Každý máme nejakú ťarchu.
You know, don't look behind anymore.
Nepozeraj sa dozadu,
Just look forward
ale pozeraj sa dopredu.
and move forward.
A posúvaj sa dopredu.
It doesn't matter what mistakes you made in the past,
Nezáleží na tom, aké chyby si spravil v
what
minulosti,
wrong decisions you've made.
alebo zlé rozhodnutia.
Those things are the past.
Tie už sú minulosťou
They have nothing to do with the present
a nemajú dosah teraz na túto prítomnosť.
unless you let them.
Iba ak im dovolíš, aby
Move forward,
mali.
press forward,
Ale posúvaj sa dopredu.
move forward in Him.
Posúvaj sa dopredu v ňom.
So I'm going to just end this with a word prayer, and then the guys are going to lead us, I think, in one last song. Yeah. And then
Ukončím nás modlitbou, potom chalani nás ešte uvedú do jednej piesne
we'll just hang out a little bit.
a potom môžeme tráviť čas spolu.
And if you didn't meet, I'm going to embarrass him. If you didn't meet my nephew Nord, meet him.
A ak ste ešte nestretli nášho synovca Norika, tak sa s ním zoznámte.
He's pretty cool.
On je super.
I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but
Viem, že nemáme mať obľúbencov, ale...
Nevinný si odsúdia ťa, vieš, o ranách, ktoré dotknú sa ťa, vieš, prevodnú a vysmejú ťa, vieš, poznáš nás a predsa ideš preč. Opustený dávaš všetko, vieš, krv a voda z teba musí tiecť. Výdychom mi dých navraciaš späť. Poznáš ma a predsa šepkáš áno, za teba pôjdem. Hoden si prijať, čo strácam svoj život za tvoj dár. Za teba áno, za teba pôjdem. Hoden si prijať, čo strácam svoj život za tvoj dár. Si prijať, čo strácam svoj život za tvoj za teba áno, za teba pôjde. Hoden si prijať, čo stráca svoj život za tvoj dár. Za teba áno, za teba pôjde. Hoden si prijať, čo stráca svoj život za tvoj dár. Za teba áno, za teba pôjde. Hoden si prijať, čo stráca svoj život za tvoj dár. Hovor, po čom túžiš. Moje nohy máš, kráčaj kam len túžiš. Moje ruky máš, konaj to, čo túžiš. Moje srdce máš, miluj ako vieš len ty. Moje ústa máš, hovor, po čom túžiš. Moje nohy máš, kráčaj kam len túžiš. Moje ruky máš, konaj to, čo túžiš. Moje srdce máš, miluj ako vieš len ty. Áno, pošli ma, pôjdem, ohlásim zajatým slobodu, zlomený nádej dám. Pre teba áno, pošli ma, pôjdem, ohlásim zajatým slobodu, zlomeným nádej dám. Pre teba áno, pošli ma, pôjdem, ohlásim zajatým slobodu, zlomeným nádej dám. Pre teba áno, pošli ma, pôjdem, ohlásim zajatým slobodu, zlomeným nádej dám.
Let's pray.
Pomodlíme sa.
Lord, we do thank you that you call us heavenward to amazing things.
Pane, my ti ďakujeme za to, že ty nás pozývaš do nebeských vecí.
As an old gospel song, no turning back, we've decided to follow you, no turning back.
Ako tá stará pesnička hovorí, že rozhodol som sa ísť za tebou a už sa nechcem otáčať naspäť.
And Lord, even if it feels like we are going upstream and there might be some bears or whatever,
A Pane, aj keď sa možno snažíme plávať proti prúdu a ideme hore tou riekou a možno sú tam aj nejaké medvede,
we believe that we're going to get to the end.
veríme tomu, že sa dostaneme až na koniec.
And that it will be good and that will be life.
A že to bude dobré a bude tam život.
Lord, and so we ask that you take the things that we've listened to this morning,
A Pane, tak zober všetky tie veci, ktoré sme dnes počúvali,
things we sung, the things we experienced,
o čom sme spievali, čo sme zakúšali,
and do something in our hearts, do something in our minds.
a vykonaj skrze ne niečo v našich mysliach a v našich srdciach.
That you make a little shift that wasn't there before.
Aby si posunul niečo, čo možno predtým tam nebolo.
And so we just thank you for this time in your name.
A ďakujeme ti za všetky tieto veci v tvojom mene.
Amen.